I'm Pat Doris. Welcome to The Story. Hey, there's a new ripple in the case involving Oregon's gun control law. Remember Measure 114? We'll get to that in a moment. But first, we're going to talk about water. For the past 7 years or so, the Water Bureau in Portland has been working to build a new filtration plant in East County. When it was first approved by City Council back in 2017, it was supposed to cost around $500 million. And then the cost went up, and then they went up again. And just this week, City Council approved the most recent cost increase. And that is our big story tonight. We started at $500 million 7 years ago, so where are we now? Well, how about an estimated $2.1 billion? It's sort of like the money's just flowing right out of the tap. This should make you feel warm and cozy, though. The Water Bureau says that our rates won't be going up because of that number. Well, they won't be going up any more than they are already going up. So what exactly does all that mean? Environmental reporter Cale Williams brings us an update on a story that he's followed for years.
Portland loves its water. But is it worth spending more than $2 billion on? According to the City Council, the answer is a unanimous yes. On Wednesday, the council approved the latest cost estimate for its new filtration plant, a whopping $2.13 billion. That's $300 million more than the last estimate, and more than 4 times what the project was supposed to cost when it was proposed in 2017.
We are hoping to break ground in the next couple of months. We are just awaiting final permits through the county.
That's Jody Inman, chief engineer for the Portland Water Bureau. And she explained that the things driving up costs for the filtration plant are many of the same things that are driving up costs of just about everything else. Things like inflation and supply chain issues. And as the Bureau has started getting bids for the work, they're competing with other projects across the country.
There's just a lot of work out there right now, a lot of big projects in the region and nationally. And so we see that increased competition, and that resulted in getting some higher bids. And that's really what we see in this recent cost increase.
But there are some other factors at play, too. The city has a hard deadline of September 2027 to have the plant fully up and running. Commissioner Mingus Mapps oversees the Water Bureau.
This filtration plant needs to be up and running in 40 months and 3 weeks. Every day there is a delay. That will cost the people of Portland money, which they did not have to spend.
To understand the time crunch, you have to go all the way back to 2006. That's when the Environmental Protection Agency issued a rule requiring water districts to treat drinking water for contaminants. But Portland's water, which comes from the Bull Run watershed, was so clean that the city got an exemption. That only lasted till 2017, when a pathogen called cryptosporidium showed up in routine testing, and the EPA said we had to start treating our water no later than 2027. Now, the city has butted heads with a vocal group of local residents who feel their rural East County neighborhood is the wrong place for a 50-acre filtration plant. With the deadline looming, any delays compress the construction timeline and drive costs up. Lauren Corder lives next door to the proposed site and is part of a group that is seeking to overturn county approvals of the project.
We filed our appeal, and it's still in process. We can expect maybe a decision in 8 months or so.
The plant would have massive impacts on a rural neighborhood, she argued. And she thinks the city, they picked that location on a small road called Carpenter Lane because they thought there would be less local opposition.
They chose Carpenter Lane. They felt like they could get through the process quicker and avoid delays. Maybe because we're a bunch of country bumpkins, I don't really know. And they didn't expect us to fight back. But yeah, the delays are coming. They're not going to meet their deadline.
Inman told me that locals like Corder, they have every right to oppose the project. But delays are part of the reason the price keeps going up.
It's impacted it fairly significantly, We appreciate it's a public process and everybody has the right to participate and their voices to be heard.
When she said so at the city council meeting on Wednesday, it did not sit well with Corder.
Jody Inman got up there and said, we have to keep moving forward. We have to do this. We cannot delay anymore. If we delay, this is going to cost us more. And it felt very hurtful, to sort of blame us. She said, it's costing more because of the delays.
Corder said that if the appeals don't work, her group is willing to sue. But Inman said, as of now at least, she still thinks they'll get the job done on time.
We have contractors that have schedules that show that we can get the work done. It is tight, I will say that.
But with an extra $300 million tacked on, will Portlanders see their bills go up? The answer is yes, with a caveat. Rate increases were already going to happen. We're looking at a 7.9% increase this year, and we'll see 8.1% increases next year, and every year after that until 2030.
These increases won't increase the rates any more than is already in the projected rate increase. So we've already accounted for it.
But the Bureau will have to trim the fat elsewhere. They'll delay some seismic improvements and other big projects, and they're probably going to have to dip into their reserves. But with so much uncertainty remaining in the project, from labor costs to inflation to the ongoing opposition from people like Corder, I asked Inman if this is the last time we're going to see the price jump.
I always hope it's the final estimate.
Kale's with me now. This story drives me crazy. There's 4 people in my house. Every 3 months now, we're paying $500 for Portland water. And now you're telling me it's going to go up another 50% in the next 5 or 6 years?
I think I got you beat. There's 2 people in my house. We pay about $300. So yes, that is what I'm telling you. But I'm not telling you that. That's what the city's telling you. Don't take it out on me.
Oh, man. Well, I'm not. But this does kind of seem like we heard last year. Prices going up, up, up.
You know, it really struck me when I was listening into the city council meeting. I mean, you had Mayor Wheeler up there saying, this is so expensive. How much is too much? Where is the ceiling on this thing? Which was almost a carbon copy of what he said when it was $1.8 billion, and it's now $2.13. And then, just like last year, they voted unanimously to approve it.
It feels like a runaway train. I know we need it, but weren't there cheaper options?
There were. I mean, places like Seattle and San Francisco, they use ozone and UV to treat their water. It doesn't filter it, and that's the big benefit of filtration. Is there's a thing called turbidity, which is basically a fancy word for you have a lot of stuff in your water, which can happen if there's a mudslide after a storm or a big fire, like we had the Camp Creek fire up in Bull Run last year. And so when you filter, you can take that stuff out. When you treat it, you don't, and that's the big benefit that we're paying $2 billion for.
Wow, yeah. And okay, overall, how does it go from $500 million to $2 billion?
Well, I mean, like you heard in the piece, there's inflation, there's supply chain issues, there's these delays related to the opposition, but there's also other parts of this project that have been added since that $500 million. There's about 7 miles of seismically reinforced pipe that's part of this project now that wasn't in that $500 million that was originally proposed to City Council in 2017.
Wow, it just, I feel a taxpayer revolt coming. It's not directed at you. It's not directed at you, but it's certainly not fun. All right, thanks, Kale. Appreciate it. The Oregon Court of Appeals today said it would not override an Eastern Oregon judge's ruling, at least not right now, that puts the state's gun control measure, Measure 114, on hold. The Court of Appeals did agree to speed up the time where it will hear the full arguments in the case, but for now, Measure 114 is still on hold. Let's dive into this latest ruling. After the Eastern Oregon judge ruled the law could not take effect, the state took the case to the Court of Appeals. The state wanted the Court of Appeals to enact the law now, while the legal case works its way through the system. And the judges said, no, we're not going to do that. The court said it looked at 4 factors in deciding whether to do what the state wanted, which is called granting a stay. It's number 1, the likelihood that the state would win its argument. Number 2, whether the action the state wanted was taken in good faith and not for the purpose of delay. Number 3, whether there is any support in the facts or in the law for what the state wanted. And number 4, the nature of the harm to the state or other parties, to other persons, and to the public that will likely result from doing what the state wanted or not doing it. So the will likely, you're going to see, that's a big part of this. Okay, so those are the 4 questions the judges dug into when deciding if they should grant this stay, which would put Measure 114 into effect immediately, because they would stay the Eastern Oregon judge's ruling that said it cannot go into effect. The court said they can also use other factors to decide this issue, and the biggest one that they pointed to is that Measure 114 is not currently enacted and has never been enacted since it was passed by voters in 2022, and that these stays typically are granted to support the status quo, not to change things up, and the state wants to change things up by enacting the law immediately. So the judges were persuaded that they should tell the state no and maintain the status quo with the law being kept on hold. And now getting back to those 4 points, number one, would the appellant prevail? Well, the Court of Appeals said each side had pretty good arguments, so they kind of thought either side could win. It brushed past number 2 and 3 since the state's not trying to delay but actually speed things up. And as they said back on point number 1, both sides have pretty good arguments. Then for point number 4, the nature of the harm, the state argued it has an interest in enforcing laws, especially those that promote public safety during an epidemic of violence. But the court was not buying that. The Court of Appeals said the state could only point to speculative harm. In other words, their fear of a shooting that was going to happen, but they have no proof. And the judges said that fear was not good enough. So again, the Court of Appeals kept things as they are. Measure 114 continues to be on ice, not taking effect. The court agreed to speed up hearing the full case, though, but speed, kind of a relative term when you're talking about these courts. The court set a deadline of 119 days from now for the two sides to submit their legal arguments and responses. So it's going to be a while. Now let's get on to an update on Portland's drug crisis. Tonight we're focusing on the flesh-eating concoction called Tranq. It's a cattle and horse tranquilizer that people are mixing with fentanyl and meth, and it's leading to horrific and deadly outcomes. We first told you about this about a year ago. Health officials were on the lookout as the drug made its way west from places like Philadelphia, and now it's here. Today, Blair Best discovered that it's already killed several people in our region, and she found others living on the street, living with its painful consequences. We do want to warn you, some of the video you're about to see is disturbing.
Willie has a history with addiction heard often on Portland streets.
Years ago, I started off with heroin, never shot up, went to the fentanyl pills, now the powder.
And lately, a new hidden drug.
It's in the fentanyl, right? I guess the Tranq is used for animals. Obviously, the tranquilizer somehow, some way it got into the fentanyl, the opiate.
He's talking about an animal tranquilizer called xylazine, known on the streets as Tranq, a flesh-eating drug making its way across the Pacific Northwest.
I never experienced anything like this in my life, so it's very life-threatening.
The first time Willie smoked Tranq, it was laced in his fentanyl.
I just know the dope was good. Some of my buddies, they were like, no, you don't want to take that. Don't smoke that no more. That has Tranq in it, the Tranq in it. So I stopped taking that.
It was too late. The drug had already infected his feet.
So I just came from the hospital or whatever. This is actually good. So I'll be able to scrub all this pinkness around here. It's good. Before, it was green. All this was green. I experienced maggots with it. I experienced gangrene. This happened because of the Tranq, yeah.
Multnomah County Health Department data shows one person died from an overdose involving Tranq and fentanyl in 2022. 5 people died in 2023. There are no confirmed deaths involving Tranq so far this year.
Fortunately here, we're still in the single digits.
Dr. Teresa Everson is with the Multnomah County Health Department, where they're watching the rise in Tranq closely.
And the first thing that we always go to in public health is education, making sure that people are aware of what exists in the local drug supply, making sure folks know how they can stay safe.
That, and it's not going to close up or go away unless you take a break from the fentanyl.
So is Tranq and what it does to you really the turning point for you to get off drugs?
He had to think about it.
That, and I know better than what I'm doing.
Okay, Blair joins me now. Blair, one of the things I wondered is how this tranquilizer becomes flesh-eating. And I checked with the FDA, the CDC, found no word on why that happens. And then I found a New York Times article that had a big write-through and basically said doctors are perplexed on why that happens. So if our viewers are wondering, I think the medical world just doesn't know. Also, you talked with one guy who had the infection on his feet. Do other people out there know about the drug and are they using it?
Right, so I was, given the low levels that we're seeing here in Multnomah County, I was half expecting to hit the streets today and have people either not really know much about it or not use it often. And we parked the car downtown by the Central Library, and immediately when I got out, there were these 2 homeless men, and I asked them about it, and they didn't want to go on camera, but they said, oh yeah, we love using Tranq. We use it all the time because it lasts longer and it's stronger than fentanyl. They said they chase dope all day and that they're not afraid of dying from an infection because street life is so hard. So, I was surprised, honestly, that the first 2 people I run into know Tranq well. we could turn the corner and find that man we featured today, and he had the infections from it. So almost everyone we talked to knew about tranq or used tranq. So yeah, even though deadly overdose levels are low, it's out there.
I think that's one of the unique things about your reporting is you actually hit the streets and talk to the people regardless. Instead of waiting for some fancy report, we can say it's here and it's pretty darn common on the street. Okay, Blair, and I also know that one of the dangers is that Narcan does not work against crank, so makes it super dangerous. What are officials doing right now in case the trend continues or even gets worse?
Well, I will add, Narcan, it does not work against tranq because it's not an opioid, but what we're seeing now is tranq is always laced in fentanyl, so Narcan would work because Narcan works against fentanyl. So they're encouraging people to still use Narcan if someone's overdosing. But the county health department is now working closely with law enforcement, testing the drugs that they take off the streets to try and track the rise in tranq here in Multnomah County. And as I mentioned, we're still seeing low levels compared to other East Coast cities like Philadelphia and Baltimore, even in Clark County in Washington, where we're seeing reports now that fentanyl laced with tranq is nearly doubled in the drug supply there.
And based on what you've seen, I wonder if the numbers are even higher than what the reports are. The issue of mental illness on the streets and in jails is nothing new. Oregon struggles with it, and it's not much better to the north. The state of Washington is given 14 days to do a competency evaluation on a defendant accused of a crime when they're believed to have a mental disability. These graphs show how things in jails have improved since 2022. You can see as of the end of last month, they are meeting that 14-day deadline. But obviously, it has not always been that way, with some people waiting months in jail at the beginning of 2023. When Washington is not meeting that 14-day deadline, by the way, a federal judge is holding them in contempt, doling out big fines. The state has racked up over $400 million in fines so far and has paid just over $200 million. The money is used to try and improve the broken system. And there's new hope on the horizon for more psychiatric beds to improve things, thanks to an expansion project at Western State Hospital, even though it's coming in well over budget. Drew Mickelson from our sister station in Seattle explains.
The expansion of Western State Hospital is going to cost about 50% more than legislators originally thought, but this is something the courts have demanded, and the state admits it's time to move forward.
It's
stood for almost 100 years.
They can move the piece of equipment in a safe manner across the building.
But this old chapel will be rubble by tomorrow.
This is a milestone that we've been planning for a long time. It's very rewarding to see it, and it's really transformative.
A dozen buildings are coming down at the state's largest mental health facility, Western State Hospital. They've been treating people suffering from mental illness here since the 1800s.
He has now been incarcerated 4 months.
But the last decade has been a time of backlogs and lawsuits. A federal judge found the state was violating the constitutional rights of people who had been arrested but were sitting in county jails awaiting competency exams at the hospital. The new facility will add 350 beds to Western State, nearly doubling the capacity for patients with either convictions or criminal cases pending.
This is once in a lifetime. You know, DSHS has been waiting for this process, and just getting to this point is just like your dream comes true.
It won't house patients for another 4 years, and it will cost nearly $1 billion. But the Department of Social and Health Services views the project as the start of a proud new era.
We hope that we'll start easing the problem. It's not an overnight change, but it's going to be just a process that we will go slowly, but that's the goal.
The state says the situation is already improving. In 2015, those arrested requiring competency reviews waited 25 days on average for an evaluation, a number that jumped to 4 months post-pandemic. But now those patients are seen in less than 2 weeks. Figures the state hopes continue to drop. The state's hoping this new expansion project will eventually help the state get that federal certification back, qualifying the state for hundreds of millions of dollars in federal support.
An astronaut born and raised in Camas, Washington is spending 6 months aboard the International Space Station. And our Devin Haskins was able to interview him as he floated in space.
It orbits the Earth at more than 17,000 miles an hour, making the International Space Station a science laboratory like no other.
Being a science weenie, I'm kind of a kid in a candy store up here doing every kind of science experiment you could possibly imagine.
That's Dr. Michael Barrett, one of 7 crew members currently living on the ISS.
Ignition, engines full power, and liftoff.
In early March, Barrett was part of Expedition 70. He'll spend 6 months studying everything from physics and biology to the effects of space on the human body.
Yeah, I would have to say that every system in the body changes when it gets into zero gravity, and mostly it's the body adapting to kind of get to a place where it wants to be when there's no gravity. And so that includes losing maybe 15% of your blood volume and your red blood cells, and your heart changes shape, changes position.
This is not Barrett's first time in space. He has been to the ISS 2 other times, first in 2009 and then again in 2011.
The station is still this wonderful old station that I remember. It's big, it's capable, it's very international.
Dr. Barrett grew up in Camas, graduating high school there. He says his love of astronomy started young. He built telescopes and just loved the dark skies.
I kind of grew up as an OMSI kid, and I was able to explore some of those areas as a kid, actually, doing some of the camps and doing some of the activities at OMSI. So that actually had a lot to do with kind of nurturing those broad interests.
I was at a fifth grade classroom yesterday and said, hey, I'm going to talk to an astronaut aboard the space station. Is there a question that you would ask him? The first one, what's it like in space?
There's maybe a couple of things that really make space amazing. One is zero gravity. So, I mean, this is zero gravity. It's something you have to get used to, but after a while, you love it. You become a three-dimensional creature and you fly like Superman, and you can move heavy things, and it's just really awesome.
Another one is what is your favorite food to eat up there?
Some of the things I really like, the shrimp cocktail is great. Because we're an international station, we have food from everywhere. So some of the Russian foods I really like quite well.
One of the students giving a presentation saying he wanted to be an astronaut was saying how hard it is to get into the space program. So for you, do you remember that challenge of getting in, and how hard was it for you?
You know, I'm no genius. My high school counselor reminded me of that. He said, you're no genius, but hard work will make up for that, and curiosity. And he was absolutely right. So I wouldn't want any student to feel like you have to be an absolute Einstein to do this job.
He said the best way in is
find something that's useful to the space program, get passionate about it, because you can't be good at anything unless you really love it.
Advice from an astronaut orbiting the Earth more than 20 times faster than the speed of sound.
That looks pretty cool. Hey, that's the end of our show. Thanks for watching. And remember, the story, our collective story, that never ends. It's Friday, and that means that Timbers 360 is coming your way next. Enjoy your weekend. I'll see you right back here Monday night, 6:30.